Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Duke Football Coverage Podcast, brought to you as always by Bull City Coordinators. You know where to follow us, bullcitycoordinators.com, at Duke FB Coverage. We are on Reddit somewhere. I don't remember what our handle is, but we're there too. Slowly taking over. We had a visitor recently check out our website from Turkey. We're building an international brand. The interview with Kobe Cofield got a lot of content distribution up in Canada, which was nice. And more important, I have to make a correction. This was brought to my attention by my father recently. I have repeatedly said in regard to the Miami game, which hopefully we will not relive again this evening, that I was watching that game with my friend Tim. That part is true, but I left out another person that I was watching it with. My dad had actually come up. My dad and mother were in town visiting, and I had forgotten about that because it's so rare these days I get to watch a game with my dad. But he was there, and he suffered through that misery as well. So yet another Mike Duncan-esque correction for you History of Rome and Revolutions podcast fans. We've got that behind us, and we are turning now this evening to our second, I believe, repeat guest in podcast history. You all remember this gentleman from a very interesting and informative talk that we had about the intersection of politics and sports. We have Lee Rodio, who has graciously taken some time out of a Saturday evening to come back on the program, catch us up to speed on where he is now, and we're also going to talk about spring ball, summer ball, and what the Blue Devils might be up to right now. Mr. Rodio, sir, how are you?
Man, it's great to be back with you, man. I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to hopefully a great year of Duke football.
You are not the only one. We are all excited and anxious for what will hopefully be a bounce-back season. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the podcast because, as you and I had discussed a little bit earlier today, you know, guys, this could be a season with more losses than wins, but a lot of close ones, and a lot of us might be real optimistic about the direction of this program if we're patient with them. But hopefully there'll be more wins than losses. So we'll discuss the permutations and the options in a little bit. But before we get to that, Lee, why don't you tell us how you've been spending your summer? What are you up to these days?
Yeah, I am working as much as I can find work to do right now. I'm on summer break from law school, just finished up my first year. And so far they have not told me not to show back up next semester, so that's always a good sign.
Well, they'll do that until your check bounces. So,
yep. I'm working in the General Assembly in Raleigh. I'm working as a research assistant for a professor at the law school. I'm also doing some work as a custodian. So covering all the bases.
Well, you know, it's interesting. So you've got two paying jobs this summer, correct?
3.
Okay, 3. So you're getting paid. So you are, man, living the high life. Let me tell you about the summer of my 1L year. Okay, I got a paying job that summer, but it was not clerking for a local federal magistrate judge, which I did, which was great experience, and I can't say enough good things about that judge and all that I learned from him. The paying job I had was Friday through Sunday washing dishes at the country club in Lexington, Virginia. That's what I did to make money over that summer.
Well, that's it builds character. That's the most important part.
Well, having had a lot of jobs like that, I hope that I've built a lot of character. So what now? You're doing research assistant, General Assembly, and custodial work?
Yep.
Okay. Well, you know what? Law school ain't cheap, so you got to get the money where you can get it, as long as it's
yes, sir.
ethically.
The grind never stops.
That's right. Just make sure it's ethically permissible and within the bounds of the law. Okay.
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right. So tell us a little bit, though. This is more for my interest than anybody else, perhaps. There are some folks who listen to this who may be more interested in the legal education, the legal field. But what kind of classes do you have coming up to start your 2L year?
Yeah, so my 2L year, the ones I can remember off the top of my head, I am knocking out evidence and First Amendment in the fall semester. Those are the bar/foundational classes I'm taking. I'm taking a couple classes on North Carolina specific law, which I'm really excited about. I've got a criminal procedure investigations coming up, North Carolina constitutional law, North Carolina pretrial adjudication. Just trying to tailor it more towards my aspirations, which are very state centric. So I'm really excited. That one nice thing about Duke was that we didn't have prerequisites. We had codes, so you still had to take certain subjects, but you were able to find. It was easier to find ones that were more tailored to what you wanted to do. So first year of law school, prerequisite foundational classes are something new to me in the college experience. So I'm very excited to get to some stuff that I actually want to be taking. So I'm quite excited.
Well, good, and that's always good if you know you're going to practice in North Carolina to start getting exposed to North Carolina law. Now, I remember our Virginia law and procedure class was taught by a practitioner in Lynchburg. That was very helpful. Our trial ad class was taught by a practitioner in Stanton, and of course the death penalty clinic, which is now out of business here in Virginia, but the Virginia Capital Case Clearinghouse Clinic that I was a part of, working with a very accomplished death penalty litigator. That was something else. Shout out to David Bruck for that experience. And hopefully some of your courses will have the teaching done by hands-on working attorneys. That always makes a big difference, I found, at least for the people who know they want to go into litigation.
Right.
All right. Well, so how are you keeping yourself sane during this summer, and how have you managed to keep yourself sane during your 1L year, which checks notes remembers very well as being quite stressful? Did you keep up with any hobbies, keep playing the guitar? What'd you do to keep yourself normal?
Just trying to lean into the usual stuff. One interesting non-school related thing that I've been trying to explore is exercise and personal health post athletics. It doesn't really occur to you till you hang up the cleats for the final time that I played football for 14 years, played sports before that, and never in my life have I exercised for anything other than athletic purposes. So exercising for personal health is unfortunately a new concept. So trying to navigate those waters has definitely been an interesting process and taking up some time and effort. So that's one of the main things. Playing guitar, trying to keep up with current events. You said staying sane, so that might not be the best best answer to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just trying to lean into the classic stuff, and there's. I wish there was time to expand the repertoire. I have picked up. I used to play the violin, so I've picked that up a couple times recently to try to see how much I remember. But other than that, just hitting all the classics.
Yeah, where you are, I think they call that the fiddle, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
You got to get the working man, thing in there for your political career. You don't want to be calling it a violin.
Hadn't quite mastered the Devil Went Down to Georgia yet, but it's a work in progress.
Well, good. That's exciting. That's having some distraction to get your mind off things, clear the air a little bit, refocus yourself is good. And so that's good to hear. You've got stuff that you can turn to keep yourself as sane as possible as you go through the law school grind. So let's switch gears just a little bit though and talk about Duke football. What I'd like to talk to you about for a little bit, or the next section of this interview, relates to primarily what you guys do in the off season and what you guys are building up to as you go through the spring game, the practices, summer practice, and leading into that first game. Tell us a little bit about what the team does in the off season.
Yeah, well, I never went through a summer with the team just because as a walk-on, we were a little more free than scholarship guys to go do summer internships, stuff like that. But the main part of the off-season is the spring, infamous spring ball. And if you ask anybody who has ever spent a full calendar year on a college football team, they'll tell you that spring ball absolutely stinks. It is essentially fall camp, but with class. So the typical spring ball day was and mercifully, I think they've eased up on this time frame since my days there. But we would have to be dressed and ready to go in the indoor practice facility down beside the stadium at 6:00. We would run for an hour, then we'd come back, and you would either go straight to the weight room or you'd have to wait around for about an hour and go to the weight room. And we would do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then we would have spring ball practices. I believe it's 15 that you're allowed to have, and those would be interspersed throughout the rest of the spring. So it is definitely a trying, grueling process that really makes you want to be there and really makes you feel bad for the freshmen who enrolled early because that's their first college experience.
Well, what is the team trying to do? What are the goals?
Well, number one, maintain your physical shape. The training itself, the strength training, the endurance training is much more intensive during the spring, just because during the fall you don't want to lean into that kind of stuff and wear the guys out. In the fall you're just maintaining. In the spring you're really shaping, molding, crafting. Not so much. The emphasis is not as much on the X's and O's, even though there is some of that, as you get with the spring game. That comes more in the fall. The suited up portion of the spring has more to do with just getting everyone kind of moving in the right direction, seeing guys different places, seeing who has what kind of skill set. But the spring is where the men separate themselves from the boys. And I'm not saying that to say that I have had any major advancements during the spring myself, but it definitely is a grueling process that really that's where the college football experience happens, is during spring ball.
All right. Well, so when do you guys start your spring ball?
It depends. It all really depends on how your previous season ended. If you didn't make a bowl game, which during my full years we didn't make one my senior year, but that's my career ended, so I didn't have to worry about spring ball. But freshman year we didn't make a bowl game, and so that accounts for that turns into about a month off from school and football. So when we got back, they got spring ball rolling as quickly as they possibly could. So we were playing our spring. I don't remember the date of the spring game that year, but it was one of the first in the country, and among major programs. If you make a bowl game, they will generally push it back. If you win a bowl game, they will generally push it back with a wink and a smile. But I think as my time at Duke went on, they started to get a little bit more happy with the later spring ball model, because that gives guys a little bit more time to just get in the groove of spring semester, and all you have to worry about is workouts. And then spring break provides guys a nice break. And truth be told, spring break is one of the longest sustained breaks that scholarship guys have. Depending on when their exams are in the spring semester, they may only have slightly less than a week off for summer break before they have to report back. So and we don't get fall break, obviously, because it's during the season. So they really do make a point of making sure that the guys have a spring break that they can enjoy. That's kind of what factors into it. We did everything. We did both extremes. We never waited so long to start that the spring game ran into exams. They always made sure that we were done with contact pad stuff before exams started, which was always very much appreciated. But that's kind of the thing that goes into it.
Well, let's say you guys go to a bowl, you win a bowl game. How many extra practices do you guys get as part of that? One, and two, do you think that that's helpful with leading into the next season?
Oh, no doubt. you obviously want to win a bowl game, but there is a certain amount of fun that's introduced in bowl practices because, classes are over, exams are over. Coaches start allowing for a little more competition because assuming you're not in a, BCS bowl or playoff game, you kind of want to use the bowl game not only to try to win a championship, but also to see what you have going into the next season. So I think our bowl games were both similar dates, both in the end of December. So we, if I remember correctly, we got out of that about 4 extra weeks of practice. I think it was about 3. About 3.5 if you count on-site practices. It's really invaluable, and that's part of the reason why you see a lot of coaches really intent on making bowl games, because that's when you're really able to, focus on football exclusively. It's one of the rare times, along with fall camp, that you can have the kids together and football be the only focus, and there not have to be academic focuses. So, it is a really invaluable time, and Duke staff always did a good job of making it an enjoyable time.
All right, let's ask a few more specific questions about what it's like in the off season. You have some familiarity with this hypothetical situation that we're dealing with right now. The Blue Devils are breaking in a new quarterback and getting ready to start a new quarterback. I'm sure you remember that from your freshman year and your senior year. What's that like?
It's and speaking my perspective, being a teammate of whoever it was that would be put into that role, but we during my time at Duke, we broke in 2 new quarterbacks. The first one being a young man from Charlotte. You might know him. His name's Daniel Jones.
Yeah, it rings a bell vaguely, right?
And the second one was Quentin Harris. When his time finally came around, he got to start the 2019 season. The first time, there really wasn't much time to contemplate having a new starter as a team, because if you remember, we went into that season thinking that Thomas Sirk would be the starter. Daniel was not slated to kind of come into his own until the next season, but Thomas Sirk had, I can't remember what it was. That might have been his 3rd ACL tear.
I think he had an Achilles.
Achilles, yes, that's what it was. Unfortunately, it was on the end of practice run, which, of all things you'd think he wouldn't be at risk participating in. But, that happened, and, it went in the blink of an eye, Daniel was the starter. So there wasn't much time to overthink things. Daniel definitely had a period of time where he had to feel his oats and learn the role, learn what it meant to be a starting quarterback. You saw glimpses of what he eventually would become. And truth be told, he caught a lot of flack for that year. But I think, when you factor in the relative youth of the team, the amount of injuries we had, you spoke to A.J. Wolf. I believe by the end of the season, he was the only healthy captain of the original captains that we had left.
Correct.
And, that a whole lot of things came together to kind of just hamstring the team as a whole that season. But, it was a growing process for Daniel, and you saw the product. Quentin was a little different, obviously, because he was a 5th-year guy. He had played fairly consistently. He was used as a short yardage quarterback, certain packages. And so it was a little more seamless when he stepped into the role. Again, a lot of stuff happened that year that I thought he caught unfair grief for. A lot of, we play a sport where the ball is not round, so sometimes it just doesn't bounce your way. And, that was, if there ever was a season of what ifs, the 2018 season for, what if, we could have been quite a bit, we could have been, nationally recognized better. And in 2019, you look at the Carolina game, you look at the Pitt game, and that's a team that could have continued the bowl streak and potentially have won I think it would have been our fourth bowl game in a row.
Yeah. So to your point about a couple of things you brought up that I want to mention. One, I'm sure you listened to the Thomas Sirk interview that we did, and just several times to just get ready for this one. I think he had his second Achilles tear or rupture on that run that you mentioned, but also to go back to the point you were making about Daniel Jones and the flack that he caught. If I recall what Thomas said correctly during our interview, I was just kind of amazed at how hard he worked to get back as he was describing it. So that's what sticks out in my mind as I'm talking to you about it. But he tore it or ruptured it again right before the season started. And Jones was getting, of course, ready to play, but it wasn't a definite that he was going to play. And I'm sure that probably factored in some to his performance. But to the 2016 season, I just remember thinking, man, if this team could be this close to being good with all the injuries and with a brand new quarterback, next year they're going to be better. And sure enough, they were. To your point about Quentin Harris, I will take some blame. I think I probably was overly critical of Quentin Harris that season. Looking back on it, to me, it seemed like he was hurt, and per program protocol, they didn't talk about it a lot. And I don't know if he was or he wasn't, but he also, just at some point in that season, he just looked not comfortable. And I think that it may have been helpful if he'd just been taken out for a game or two just to kind of clear his head, relax, refocus, and then come back in, or maybe even just a half of a game. And I think part of that played into it. So, Quentin, if you're listening, I apologize for my overly critical comments. I've learned a lot from doing this, and so I got to own up and admit sometimes when I've got to own up and admit when I've made a mistake. So I'll do that here.
I'll pass along your message to him.
All right. Well, tell him if he wants to come on and talk about that season. And I'm going to go out of order now because you mentioned 2018 as a what-if season. I have a few more questions about spring ball we'll come back to because there are some specific things that I want to ask you about that you experienced that I think is applicable now. But let's go ahead and talk about the 2018 season and what if. I mean, did you guys have anybody who wasn't hurt midway through the season on that roster?
That is a fantastic question. I'm sitting here trying to think of all the injuries, and I'm really struggling to. There were so many. I'm struggling to remember them all. I don't think. I know we were down both starting linebackers for the bowl game, and we just had such a good core group that was so decimated by injury, and even with all of that, we still had, what by any measure was a good year. Duke football standards and anybody's standards, which that just goes to show you, we were right there in so many games, which seems to be the theme of, Duke football in the past decade. And
you guys were leading Clemson at the end of the first quarter when Clemson was checks notes pretty good that season.
Yep, they had a few ballers, didn't they?
Yeah. Kobe Kwanzaa was hurt. Humphreys was hurt, who seemed like the heart and soul of that team. Giles Harris was hurt, who could just knock anybody, lay anybody out. You got Jones got hurt, I think, for 2 games, and I could go on, but I don't want to bring back all those painful memories of who got hurt. But if I didn't mention it already, Kobe Kwanzaa was hurt for a little bit. It just seemed like your secondary was decimated. I think that was the year Gilbert got hurt. It just seemed like everybody that you needed to be healthy was hurt at one point or another. And I think there was a podcast that someone did that year said you guys lost about 1/3 of active game time of players. And that didn't surprise me at all.
I remember hearing that statistic, and, it sounded quite right. You mentioned that Daniel missed some time that year. And that I just want to give a quick plug to my guys, Tim Skapek, Clark Bullitt, and Kevin Guessman. that little injury, that broken collarbone he had and came back from seemingly miraculously quickly was made possible by the ingenious efforts of those three guys to 3D print Daniel a I don't know if you could call it a prosthetic or a pad or a brace, but they make all those via 3D printing. And they have really, their company called Protected has really taken off. And I could not be more proud of three of the most incredible people I've ever known. And all, of course, Duke football walk-ons follow us on Twitter. So I would be remiss if I did not use that opportunity to shout out those guys. Kevin, just great, solid all-around dude. Clark, one of the funniest human beings I've ever known. Tim is one of those guys that just, it's almost frustrating how good he is at everything. That you talk about the Duke experience, getting to know guys like that, just quality, great human beings. That's the Duke experience in a nutshell right there. And I just wanted to shout my guys out on that one.
Well, I would be more than happy to bring them on at some point, chat with them about that, because I do remember hearing about that, and it was a great thing that they did. I'm glad to hear that their career is going so well. And so if they want to come on and chat about that, plug their business, and talk about their time as walk-ons, I'd be happy to give them that opportunity. I do want to say, though, you mentioned Jones coming back so fast. One thing about that season that I didn't understand was bringing him back against Virginia Tech when Q was in a rhythm and seemed to be playing well, and you had a bye week coming up, and Jones came back, and you took the run out of the RPO offense for that game. I didn't quite figure that out. I mean, obviously Jones is Jones, and you want him on the field, but that was a little confusing to me. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's kind of 6 one way, half a dozen the other. You make a great point, and at the end of the day, it's kind of akin to when do you pull a starting pitcher who has gotten in a rhythm, but you got a guy coming up you're not sure that he's the best arm for. It's one of those that that at the end of the day there really isn't a truly right decision. You just gotta go with your gut, and that was what that situation was. It was I think it was a Friday night game, if I'm not mistaken, nationally televised. I think the coaches just made the determination that we want to put our best guy, our best athlete on the field. I have no doubt that Quinn could have made it happen, and I think we can't remember if we used him much that game or not, but that's one of those that could have gone both ways. You just kind of got to go with one and roll with it.
Right. No, I get that, and that was a good political answer there. So you're getting in your rhythm. It's coming along. Now, let me switch back though to spring off-season ball. What's it like when you have a change in a position, Coach? We all know about the staff shakeup and the new running back coach who's come in. I think you went through that with a couple of different O-line coaches. What's that process like?
Well, there's two levels. It's coaching style is the first one, and personal relationships is the second one. That was the stretch in there where not only did we go through some offensive line coaches quickly, but we went through coaches who had formed recruiting relationships with guys fairly quickly. There were guys with years to go under their belt playing for Jim Bridge after having played for Marcus Johnson, who were recruited to Duke by John Latina. So there are a whole myriad of things that go into coaching changes. And even when it's in the same scheme, and even when you're running the same offense, as much as we like to say, you just plug and play, we're all human, and we all, there's going to be personality differences. You got to learn your guys. You got to, not everyone can be coached the same way. So there definitely is a learning curve, and, offensive line is a particularly important position, but the coaching the importance of position coaches factors in a little differently depending on where you are in the field. But that definitely is a factor, and it definitely is something that can cause a hiccup if you're not careful.
All right, tell us. You mentioned this earlier about the spring game giving people a chance to shine. Tell us a little bit about that from a player's perspective.
It's you go into it. I was I was never someone that was competing for meaningful playing time, so I always liked it because there was a chance for my parents to see me actually doing something football related for a few plays. You really just you go into it with the thought process that everybody's going to get a shot. You got to make your shot count. Duke has always our fans have I've heard some groans through the years because Duke has always done a kind of non-typical spring game format. We basically do a filmed practice with a little bit extended scrimmage period as opposed to a true game like a lot of programs do. But I think that factors also into the fact that, the coaches treat it like another practice that just happens to be on ESPN. And it's all a building block that goes into getting better and making a better product to put on the field.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit from spring and off season and talk about the NFL draft this past season. What was it like for you to see so many of your teammates either get drafted or sign free agent contracts?
And I'm not lying when I say this, it is one of the absolute best parts of participating in college athletics, getting to see the guys that you got to know over the years, you bled with, you sweated with, you shed tears with, you had triumphs with. We go to college to become professionals and become adults and move on to the next chapter of our lives. But we play college football with the hope and the dream of one day, getting to play football for our livelihoods. And to get to see teammates do that and guys that deserve it, every great thing that happens to them, there are no more deserving people. It truly is the best part of the experience of college football. I don't know if I told you the story last time, but the night that Daniel got drafted, a bunch of us, I texted him that day, just good luck, praying for him no matter what happens, the typical, what you'd say to a friend in that position. And I figured he hadn't seen his phone for days, probably wouldn't see it for days, if at all. And lo and behold, I get a text back that night from Daniel telling me how much, my message meant to him, how much he enjoyed being a teammate for those few years. And about 5 minutes after he sent that message, the commissioner called his name as, I believe, the 6th overall pick in the NFL draft. And I got to practice the next day and asked anybody else if they had heard from him. And turns out a bunch of other guys on the team had. In that period of time where he, could have and by all accounts should have been, soaking in his accomplishments and what was the blessings that were about to come to his life, he was thinking about thanking the guys that he had made the journey with. And I think that speaks to not only his quality as a person, but that speaks to, where your mind is in that moment. And the culmination of the work that it took to get there. So I just could not have been more riveted, thrilled for my teammates.
What do you think it says about the state of the program overall that you had 4 players get drafted for the first time, I think, since the 70s, and then I believe you had 3 others sign free agent contracts?
I think it says that, we're knocking on the door. One of the problems that Duke has had for so many years is even the years that we finally cracked bowl eligibility and became a competitive team, we still didn't pass the eye test. we would line up against a team that we'd end up beating. But if you had looked at the two teams before the game, physically, we were outmatched and outgunned, but we made it work. And Duke is finally getting to the point where we have, our Jimmies and Joes stack up pretty favorably to any other Jimmies and Joes that we come across. Now you just got to put it into practice. You got to put that plan into action. And I think if anybody has the capability of doing that, it would be Coach Cutt.
Well, I think the biggest challenge that he's going to face, or that the team's going to face, is one that's kind of haunted the program for decades, and that's depth compared to some other programs. But given the school, given where it is, given all the peculiar factors about it, that's kind of a hard one to overcome. Although, and we can talk about this kind of a segue into next season, I think the way that they utilize the transfer portal this year, particularly to bolster the O-line, might help with some of that. Tell us, what do you think about the program heading into this 2021 season?
That's a great question, and you make a great point about effective use of the transfer portal. That's not to go off on a tangent on that, but you hear a lot of people decry the situation that certain coaches south of the North Carolina-South Carolina border that shall remain nameless, who love to complain every time the status quo is changed. But you can either complain about it, or you can go out and make the most of it to better your program. And I've been happy to see that. I would expect nothing less, of course, but I've been happy to see that Duke staff has used that change of scenery in college football as a way to put a better product on the field. Well, overall, I think this will be a very interesting year for Duke. I think this will be a make or break year. I think if there's a potential to see a lot of growth, there's a potential to see a lot of success. But the most important thing, I think, is you need to see that there's progress being made in the product on the field. I'm very excited about Duke's offense this year. Gunner is untested. I was sad to see that he didn't get more time last year. But in terms of true leaders and guys that have the full confidence of the people that'll be in the huddle with him, Gunner is second to none. We don't talk about it much because we haven't seen much of him. But he is one of the best athletes that will have gotten under center in the Cutcliffe era at Duke. And, you know the implications of that.
Well, I can tell you what happens if you have a quarterback who can't run in a running quarterback system.
Yes, I think we saw what would happen with that. But I'm very excited about the offense, particularly because this will be one of the most experienced offensive lines that Duke will put on the field this year. I believe all that they'll be looking for is a serviceable guard, which shouldn't be too hard to find. You look to Jack Woolabaugh coming back, Casey Holman anchoring the left side. I was surprised to see they bumped Jacob Monk out back to tackle, which he played my senior year. Obviously, Jacob Monk is one of the best football players I've ever played with, one of the best human beings I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. And he's going to make do with wherever you put him. But I just, I was interested to see. I felt like that was an interesting move. It'll be interesting to see how that affects his trajectory. I think he's definitely going to play in the league. I think he'll be a guard in the NFL. So we'll see.
Which side is he going to be on? Is he going to be on the left side or the right side?
I would imagine he'd be on the right since Casey has been anchoring the left side for a while. They might switch that up. I'm not sure. But his experience at tackle was at the right side. That's what he played my senior year. You've got one of the best all-around athletes in the ACC, and let alone one of the best running backs in Mateo Durant. And you've got some exciting young guys at wide receiver, anchored by everyone's favorite ball hawker, Jake Bobo.
Well, I think they've got a lot of talent. I think they've got a lot of ability. But what I think has been lacking is leadership and the drive. last year was just a mess, and I'm kind of giving them a pass last year just because I think Duke took COVID a lot more seriously than a lot of programs did, and I think that hurt their ability to probably implement things and grow the way they wanted to.
Yeah.
But this year, I don't think they're going to have that excuse, and this is an older team in many respects. I mean, that wide receiver core is full of juniors and redshirt players, and they're going to have to step up and start beating people. Start trying to win every play, every possession. Start having that David Reeves, Braxton Deaver, Jamison Crowder mindset. And
Yep.
play like the O-line did under Coach Latina during those years, right?
Yep. And I think the important thing is that the people who understand the need for growth the most is the guys in that position room. I mean, the Jacob Monk being one, and Casey Holman and Jack being the leaders in that room, they're going to have them ready to play. They understand what they left on the table last year, and I think you're going to see some very, very promising things from Duke on the offensive line, which, coupled with the stable of running backs we got coming back, I think could be a sight to see. On the defensive side of the ball, there's definitely a lot more question marks. We've got some guys in the defensive backfield that need to really solidify their roles. I think you should look for Dwayne Carter and Shaka Hayward to have even bigger roles than they already have, to kind of assert some leadership. Ben Fry also will be imperative. I don't know if you've seen him recently, but he has really got his physique on point. And it'll be no news to you. Coach Albert's not going to put anything less than a stellar unit on the field. But with a lot of young guys, a lot of transition, they're going to have to rely on that defensive front. And there'll be some question marks, there'll be some growing pains, but I think there's reason for optimism. I look to see him using Jamark Woods more. I think he was somewhat underused last year, and I think he stands to have a impactful season if used effectively.
Well, and losing Rocky Shelton doesn't help because we can go into depth issues, but that's going to be
and experience there is one of the biggest things.
Yeah, he's going to be hard to replace. Although they've got a transfer in whose name I'm passing on. I'm spacing on his last name. I think is Campbell. Played at Presbyterian. Go Blue Hose. So I don't know though if he's going to be able to come right in and play at the level that Shelton was going to play at or expected to play at. And that's not a knock on him. It's just saying we all I think had high hopes for Rocky coming into the season. Now, what are your thoughts? Actually, before we get to that, there are a couple of things that I do want to talk about related to the O-line. I think Coach Fry's got him moving in the right direction. I think Gunner can do a lot of good things. But when it comes to, you mentioned the stable of running backs, I have this crazy idea about just giving Mateo the damn ball and letting him be the lead back instead of maybe dividing it up the way that we seem to do historically. Mateo sure seems like the kind of guy who can carry the rock, and when you've got Gunner who can move around, we've seen glimpses of that, right? We've seen opportunities in the spring game here and there when he got to play a little bit last year. It seems like those two together could be a pretty formidable running combination, and we know Gunner can throw the ball too. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think you're spot on. I mean, on the question of leaning on our workhorses, I am president of the Give Britton Brown the Ball fan club, and unfortunately he won't be wearing a Duke uniform when he has the breakout year he's about to have. But from that experience, I think we can learn the valuable lesson that when a guy's hot, you got to feed him.
And speaking of going back to what we talked about with what ifs, Britton just always seemed to be getting hurt when he was wearing Duke blue, and that's always a big what if in my mind if he could have stayed healthy, which goes into some line issues that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But what are your thoughts on the staff changes? And I'm particularly interested about coaches Boyette and Ferris. What thoughts you have about those guys?
I was fascinated to see the reshuffling. I was surprised they moved Coach Boyette away from the backfield. But to be honest with you, there are not many coaches in the game right now who are better equipped to tackle any challenge they're faced with than Raekwon Boyette. I mean, he is truly one of the best coaches and the best people I've ever encountered. And it was always cool because I grew up watching him play, so getting to interact with him and as a player myself was always a neat experience. I'm very excited for Coach Ferris. I think there is no one who has devoted more to Duke football throughout the course of their young life than he has. I mean, I believe he was a walk-on himself. And stayed as a GA, has worked his way up, and it's really good to see hard work pay off for guys like that. So now I wish I could give you an idea of what it'll be like as an OC, but I truly don't know, and I'm excited to see the product that he puts on the field. But I have the utmost faith in those guys.
Okay, I think that my take on it is by putting Boyette in that room as the co-offensive coordinator, with him being a running back and a running backs coach for all those years, that there might be a little bit more running the ball than we've seen the last couple of seasons. And maybe we'll go heavy on one back and lean on him, but, we'll see. Want to ask you about one other thing, as we talked about the O-line, how important the O-line is, and I'm just curious your thoughts on the transition from Johnson to Bridge and the differences between those two guys as position coaches.
Yeah, I think I think they definitely personality-wise were different, and I can't speak to it in a fashion that would be as educated as someone who was on the offensive line at the time. But in terms of styles of play, I think Marcus played in a system that was much more ground and pound, less than everyone else at the time, because Coach Klett has been a sling the ball all over the field type of guy wherever he's been. But Marcus was more of a spread mentality kind of guy, and Coach Bridge, his most recent stop was out of the Big Ten, where as much as football has evolved, there's still a lot of, put your hand in the dirt and get 3 yards in a cloud of dust in that part of the country. And so even in our system, you saw a lot more of that going on. There was some more pulling. There was more trapping. We kind of got a little bit more north-south coaching when that change happened. Both great guys. I believe Marcus is at Missouri now.
Correct.
And Bridge is at Memphis. They both added a lot to the program. Both quite the characters. I think that'd be putting it mildly. But I think we had great guys on the field with their hands on the ground in that room, but I do think it has benefited the offensive line to have some stability in the person of Coach Fry, given that how quickly that rotating door of coaches changed.
All right, let's. Anything else you want to say about what to expect this upcoming season? Anything that we should be on the lookout for?
I think look. I would be remiss if I didn't shout out the special teams. We're going to have one of the most experienced long snappers in the business, and John Taylor, and we are going to have one of the most explosive punters in the country in Porter Wilson. So look out for a big year from Porter. The kicking situation. There was a new recruit coming in. I don't know if he's in this class or if he's in the next class. You might know that better than I do, but I always have faith in Charlie Ham. He's a great athlete, great kid, great kicker, and I think the special teams. As soon as I say it, it won't come to pass. But I think special teams will be something that will be as little of a headache as it was in the olden days of. I won't say graduating Ross Martin and Will Monday, but young Ross Martin and Will Monday. I think we'll get a good year out of our special teams room.
Yeah, those two guys are hard to equal. I think you were referring to Connor Wood, who came in from Tennessee, Lexington, Tennessee. I believe is the guy you were referring to, the other kicker. And I'm not just saying that because him and his dad follow me on Twitter, but you remember those things a lot more. Also, shout out Coach Albert. I believe that you were following me as well, as did Real Durant. Again, non-binding, but I interpret any follow of my account by players, coaches as an agreement to do an interview. Non-binding, I understand that, but that's how I interpret it. Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to give you a chance to talk about anything else you want to talk about. We didn't really do this the last time you were on. Anything you want to talk about your time at Duke, anything that we should know about the program, the school, the academics, and obviously you're going to talk initially about how you're trying to. It's a divided time. We know this, and you're trying to bridge that gap doing your missionary work at UNC Law. And obviously, you're thinking a great way to do that is to get some of those guys there, some Bull City coordinators merchandise for this upcoming season, right?
Absolutely. People always ask how it is. I say, I feel like I'm living behind enemy lines. But before we get completely off of football, I did want to give a shout out. I don't know if you know, but the comparison of overachieving walk-ons is no longer Rudy Rudiger. He had a great run. We actually got to meet him at the Walk-Ons Independence Bowl. Nice guy. But the gold standard for walk-ons is now none other than Daniel Carlin, who in his one and only play as a Duke Blue Devil football player scored a touchdown. And I don't know how you can write a story better than that.
That was pretty awesome. I remember how excited you guys were for that. Daniel, if you're listening, you're welcome as well. Everybody knows how to get a hold of me now. So please, come on. The more the merrier. All right. So tell us anything else you want to mention about your time at Duke, about the academics, the school, the campus, the football program, anything. It's an open mic.
I think, it is very rare. We get caught up in successes on the field, and, that's what we're supposed to do because that's what, college football is all about. At the end of the day, it's winning. But I think Duke fans can take a lot of pride in the fact that not many other programs are consistently putting out guys who you will see in the paper from what they did for the Buffalo Bills, shout out Joe, or the Pittsburgh Steelers, shout out Mark, or the New York Giants, shout out DJ. You'll see those guys in the paper, but you'll also see CEOs in the paper, future politicians in the paper, prominent attorneys in the paper. Shout out, Joseph Ajibi, Scott Jones. Like I said, the guys that founded Protected. Tim, Clark, and Kevin are going to absolutely conquer the world one day, and I don't know if it'll be through this company or what. But the truly greatest. People talk about the Duke experience. The greatest thing about the Duke experience is the wealth of human experience you encounter. I hone in on the walk-ons just because it's such an interesting group of people, and the circumstances about how they got there are remarkable. Wyatt Smith going on The Voice, Now he's a doctor and I believe a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army, if I'm not mistaken. You get all the old heads: Grant Hall, Danny Sturt, Kane Banner, Ryan Wolitzer, Noah Waddell, just guys doing great things and are going to make a great impact on the world. It's in football and it's not in football. It's not very often. You get a lot of schools where you get a lot of guys. The Ivy League, you produces a lot of CEOs. Alabama produces a lot of NFL players. There's not many programs in the country that produce both. And I think Duke fans can take a lot of pride in the fact that, Duke football is one of those elite few programs. To tie it back into, politics, government, and everything else you're not supposed to talk about at a dinner party. I don't know if you or your listeners have seen Kenny Chesney's Boys of Fall special on ESPN. But if you haven't, you should stop whatever you're doing and go look it up online. You'll notice, I believe, a cameo from a certain Blue Devils football coach. But in that story, they talk about how, football is one of the only places in society where any given huddle you can find a Jew, a Muslim, an atheist, a Christian, a Buddhist, a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, a libertarian, all in the same huddle, working for the same common goal, sacrificing for each other, and growing closer as human beings. And one of the great things about football, outside of the traditional concepts of success and fame and fortune, is the fact that when all else fails, you look at those huddles, you look at those teams, and you see hope for the future. It's the same thing as you walk through a elementary school and you see faces of kids and the hope and the dreams they have. Another place you see that is on a football team. A great example, Duke specific, Colin Duffy, great guy, friend of mine. He chaired one of the two major political party organizations at Duke, and before I graduated, served as vice chair of the other. Not only were we on the same team in the same huddle, we were in the same position group, and you don't get that anywhere else. And when all else seems lost and everything seems bleak, when you don't want to watch the news for all the bad stuff that's going on, that's one way that sports and football specifically can tie us all back together, and that's another reason why it was such an honor to be able to be a part of what I got to be a part of at Duke.
So you guys out there who are considering where to commit to, you just got your pitch on why you should choose Duke. Just save time, just call Coach Fry. I think he's the one in charge of the recruiting, and copy me on the email so I can break the news. But you mentioned Clark and Kevin, and if there was another guy in there, I apologize if I leave him out.
Tim.
Who did the 3D printer work? Those three guys. Who helped Daniel Jones come back should now take advantage of the name, image, and likeness rules and do a sponsorship with a lot of players. I'm sure they could get an in. Lord,
I think they have. I think I remember seeing something on their company's social media that dealt with that. But I checked that out. I think they're trying to help the guys out in that way.
Well, that's fantastic, because football, they've tried to clean it up and make it a lot safer, but it's still a contact sport and people are still going to get hurt. And those guys obviously know how the game is played, and they can show that, hey, they get results and can help people out. So they should definitely do that. I'm excited about the name, image, and likeness laws changing, and I'm also a big fan of the transfer portal, particularly after the interview I did with Joe where he described what it was like and everything he went through, and I learned a lot more about it. And, of course, as I continue to get older, as I look in the mirror every morning, I think that it's good for players to have more say over where they spend their collegiate career and not get stuck in a place that's not ideal for them or doesn't work out the way that they'd hoped. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on either NIL, transfer portal, or both.
Well, I have to say that I was very sad to see that they didn't get the NIL stuff done before I left, because I know that I could have parlayed being a 12th string reserve long snapper into such a lucrative sponsorship deal.
Well, you could have but with the singing though and the guitar, you had a lot of options. I mean, you've got a Blue Ridge, right?
Well, jokes aside, I do think I could have. I might could have parlayed that into some free meal voucher at some hole in the wall Durham restaurant.
No. You didn't you say you have a Blue Ridge guitar? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So see, they're up in Virginia. Okay, if I recall correctly, I think they're up in Stanton, and that's bluegrass mountain music country. You're in that 29 corridor. I mean, you had limitless potential there.
There you go. It might not be too late. I'll have to look into it. But in all seriousness, I could not be more thrilled at the changes that are happening. And I want to qualify that by saying, I understand the first impulse of people to say, I'm not, to be kind of, there's trepidation out there about these changes, and I don't think it's completely baseless. There are changes to things that have been done a certain way for quite a while. But at the end of the day, it circles back to, I believe, a conversation you and I had the last time we talked about how people treat players, how people view players. In that case, when they're, in the case we were talking about, when they're expressing their viewpoints. In this case, when they're asserting their individuality and their humanity and their right to have control over their own name, image, and likeness. And it's going to take some learning. But, college sports has faced major changes before and have come through it and are still a major part of our national lexicon. And, that's the same thing that's going to happen here. But the only difference is the players will emerge all the better for it. There's absolutely – you didn't see this at Duke as much, but there's absolutely no reason that prominent players like the Chris Webbers of the world should have to struggle to put food in their stomachs while the kid at the school bookstore selling their jersey makes $11 an hour. And thankfully, that won't be the case anymore for quite a few individuals. And I think we're moving quickly in the right direction. We've still got a long way to go. But if people haven't seen it, I'd recommend John Oliver Last Week Tonight. The special he did on the NCAA, some of it's changed because of the recent changes, but he put it in perspective, the realities of being a college athlete better than anyone I've ever heard. So if your listeners are interested, I would highly recommend listening to that special and just be cognizant of the foul language.
All right, and let me clarify something. I was thinking of Huss and Dalton guitars, which are based out of Stanton.
Gotcha.
Not Blue Ridge. So you could have gotten a sweet deal on all sorts of, guitars that you could have parlayed. And then, because, when you're in law school and you know how expensive that can be, you can then sell some of those to fund your law school career. So, it came a little late, but I think it's a good thing, too. I mean, especially college football has gotten so big. Certainly since I was a kid up until now, when the SEC became the SEC and the Big 12 formed and you started having all these divisions and then conference championships and coaches' salaries go up. And there's just so much money there. And there's so much there's so many chances to get a slice of the pie. And listening to you guys, players, talk about what your schedule is like, it's not easy, and most of you have a very short career, right?
Yeah.
And there's no reason you shouldn't be able to take advantage of that to the fullest extent possible, given all the TV contracts, all the interviews you have to do, all the obligations that are put on you. I mean, there's no reason that you guys shouldn't be able to benefit from that. So I'm glad to see that occurring.
Yeah, and I think that the people talk about as a detriment or as a negative effect of the changes. People talk about, well, won't this widen the gap between major programs and mid-major programs? I don't really think that's true. I mean, I don't think people are thinking about the fact that many mid-majors have pretty robust local markets. Think about all the fan bases for the MAC schools. People have a lot of pride in their local school. I think you'll start to see those dividends pay off for the athletes that go there. There are kinks that have to be worked out, but many of the boogeyman scenarios that people would voice to try to keep this from happening, I just don't see coming to pass.
Right, and they're not going there for the NIL benefits. They're going there to play, and they're going to go to a place where they're going to get to play. And I think that's going to be first and foremost. And then if you're trying to choose between two schools and you're not really sure which one you want to go to, you're probably going to do what a lot of us have done in any situation, in any career in our life. Okay, well, who's going to pay me the most, right? Or in this case, the school's not paying you, but you're going to say, well, what's my marketing opportunity if I go to school A versus school B? Just like in my legal career, when I'm looking at where can I work, where do I want to go, one of the first things I look at is, what kind of money am I going to make? I mean, that's what we all do, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be beneficial, and I think once all the 50 states get to the same place, it'll be much less of an issue, and everybody seems to be moving in that direction. So I think it'll work itself out pretty soon, but I think overall it's good. Well, Lee, I just want to say thanks a lot for coming back on here. I've enjoyed this talk. We've learned a lot about what to expect from spring and summer ball going forward, what to look forward to in the off season. And, as far as this season coming up, I know I said it earlier, guys, just be patient with this team. They may not get exactly where we want them to be this year, but I think this could be a team that you look at a lot like that 2011 season where you kind of say, hey, this team's pretty close to being good. And if we're just patient, if we just stay the course, maybe it's not 2021, but man, maybe 2022 could be a magical season. So,
before we go, can I interject one thing that I forgot to mention earlier?
Absolutely.
There are very few times in life, but in sports more specifically, that you find the exact perfect person for any given role. And Duke found the exact perfect person when they hired their new athletic director. Nina is an amazing human being. She will be amazing at her job. Duke fans should be very excited to have her as our athletic director. All the love in the world to Dr. White. And she will seamlessly carry on his legacy and I would venture to say expand it.
Well, thank you for adding that in. It's always good to hear more about the new athletic director. And Lee, I appreciate your time tonight. And for those of you who are out there listening, associated with the program, past, present, or maybe future commit, coaching staff, players, whatever, you know how to get a hold of me. bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com, bullcitycoordinators.com, @DukeFBCoverage. You know where to find us. Let me give you guys a little programming note. We have a couple more interviews locked in until we hit the regular season schedule. I will not be doing podcast interviews and game previews and recaps and football season analysis on bullcitycoordinators.com at the same time. We're going to shut down the interviews once we get into middle of August, and hopefully we will have a chance to pick them back up and start doing them after the season is over and into next year, because this has been very informative for me. I hope it's been informative for you, and I hope that we can continue to do these for a long time in the future. So Thanks to everybody who comes on here, and thanks to all the listeners. We will be back in a couple of weeks with another interview, and we should have, I think, 2 more before we get into the regular season. We look forward to putting them out there for you.